Great, we had testimony on that bill. We had a request for testimony last Friday that had been put off till tomorrow. So we will still be hearing some input on this tomorrow. I know some folks have been wondering what's happening with this bill. It's not in our possession. You'll recall we were asked if we would be willing to take a look at it. So that's what we're doing. We're hearing testimony. We may get a request to consider an amendment. So that will be just laying out the landscape. That won't be today, I don't think. Between those two sets of testimony, we're going to try and wrap up two bills that we have been working on, the miscellaneous housekeeping bill and H205. We'll have Mike O'Grady come in to walk through changes that he's made since we last worked with him. And we'll vote those out if the committee is comfortable with the versions that we've got. And then lastly, all that should bring us up to about 3:00. And then at 3, we're going to have the bill sponsor for H81, which is an act relating to fair repair of agriculture equipment, come in and introduce the bill. And that's subject to change just because everyone's day has been pushed back a little bit because of the morning, and I'm not sure whether that will happen right at 3. I know that travel this afternoon is probably something that people are thinking about. If we get to a point where it seems like you need to leave, let me know. And somebody's already talked to me. I don't think that it will be all that late in the afternoon when we get to here. But with that, we have the Farm Bureau with us this afternoon to have continue the conversation or the testimony on H126. Amber's with us, Amber Perry. Did you want to come up to the table? Yeah.
I think is going to try to join us online.
Okay. So we'll welcome Amber Perry to the table, and then Joe is online. Okay. Welcome, Joe. So Joe Tisbert, who we have met in the committee. Hi, Joe. President of the Farm Bureau. Welcome.
Thank you for having us in today. We're just going to touch on some concerns that we have with H126. Vermont Farm Bureau supports the efforts to address climate change as long as they recognize the valuable role of agriculture in producing food, stewarding natural resources, and strengthening our local economies. This is actually policy in our book, and it was voted on and adopted by our voting delegates in 2022. We support the idea of an initial inventory of the conserved land in Vermont. We are happy with the inclusion of input of private landowners of forest land and agricultural lands. In the original draft last session, we were not included, so we were happy to see that that was included in this draft. We've also questioned how this bill would affect the use value appraisal program, and this concern was raised while the bill was in House Environment and Energy. For example, in draft 4.1, page 8, lines 11 through 13, it states how existing programs will be used to meet the permanent non-conversion conservation goals of this chapter and recommendations for new programs that will be needed to meet the goals. When they say existing programs, are they including the use value appraisal program? Another area of concern with the current draft is also on page 8, where this was added an assessment of how water is protected in the state and how protection of aquatic systems may be addressed in the plan. The original bill as presented was about land conservation and how to achieve the goals. What is the connection of protected water to conserving land? We don't think it's relevant to the bill without further explanation. And we have heard that this is voluntary and no one will be forced in conserving their land. But what happens when we approach 2050 and we're 5% short of meeting the goal of 50%? Vermont Farm Bureau will work to ensure that our farmers' voices are heard during the public meetings. I myself am not a farmer, but as I drive through our state, I can't help but see land that may be conserved. For example, a buffer zone between an organic farm and a neighboring property, sugar bushes, or town forests. And that's all I have for you today. And I'm sure Joel will add in some more.
Right, thank you. Before we turn the mic over to you, did anyone on the committee have a question? And I will try to remember to look up onto the screen. And if we have committee members who are participating remotely but don't have their screens on because of connectivity issues, shout. Hearing no shouting and seeing no hands raised, I will turn it over to you then, Joe.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us. I am Joe Tisbert, President of Vermont Farm Bureau. So we have a lot of concerns that, taking land that's not managed and adding 10%. And what this bill has is 10% of the land, 30% of the land to be unmanaged. What does that do to our economy? What does that do to our farmland? We only have 1.2 million acres of farmland. Taking out of, conserving 30% is a great deal. It's a great platform, but taking 10% out and not be managed, what does that do to our countryside? What does that do to what Vermont looks like and what our guests are here looking for? So that's a concern. Also, current use has 2.5 million acres enrolled, or 19,000 parcels, and a third of the state's land is already conserved with current use. Now, current use, you could say current use is not conserved, but that's how current use was put in place for, to conserve land. The value of taking land out of current use for whatever reason is very expensive. And so how much of this bill will consider the current use land that is already if it's not officially conserved, it's in a process, it's in a program that conserves open land and helps support not only the farmers, but actually every taxpayer in the state. So I have a lot of concerns about, are we considering that kind of piece? Other things that I've been looking at, trying to get good numbers for, which I'm sorry I don't have the best number for, is the RAPs put buffer zones on every river. How does that affect us? Are we figuring those riparian buffers in this number? How does that affect us? Where are we going to get the numbers? What are the numbers going to be like? It just behooves me to say that I am actually in the process of conserving a river corridor on my farm. We have 4, the conservation and the voluntary conservation. What I fear in this bill is that eventually it becomes, we are already at what, 24% of the state is conserved. We need 6% more to get to 30, but how is that going to play out? If we can't get to those numbers, how are we going to get to those numbers? Where is it going to go from here? I don't believe we need a bill in Vermont. I don't believe we need to be taking out valuable industry off our economy, forestry and dairy, and not only dairy, but all agriculture in the state. What do we do then when we start conserving land that we can't manage? Taking 10% off the face of the books of our industries is not, I don't think it's where any of us want to be. So just in brief, we do already have a lot of conserved land at a higher level than most states do. We also have current use, which also is a way of conserving land. We also have buffer zones that are also considered. How is all this land going to be considered, and what will this bill do to our economy? We want to see managed ag land, managed forest land. I think that's what our members want, and I believe that's what most Vermonters want. we're all in the business of climate change and conserving climate. And that's what our farms and forests do. A well-managed farm and a well-managed forest actually sequesters the carbon that's needed to help neutralize what vehicles we have on the road and other forms of greenhouse gases. That's about all I have today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Questions, committee members? Representative Lipsky.
Yeah, thank you, Joe, and thank you, Amber. Appreciate you explaining what I understand, that there's a lot of agricultural land that does have conservation easements and it's been beneficial. I also understand that there's a significant portion of a lot of the Vermont farms that have woodland. Some is sugar bush, some is in, washed areas, or some may be in current use as woodland, but it's part of your agricultural property. I didn't understand that this act was putting pressure on agricultural land as opposed to forest land to conserve additional land, in that they have three categories and possibly a fourth, the fourth being biodiversity in itself, but of, hands-off, no management, sensitive areas, some management, but protection of riparian or other unique fragile wetland systems, and the other is managed. Are you saying that agricultural farms are going to have to conserve portions of their land to meet that same standard as forest land?
Well, my interpretation is that, and I would stand to always be corrected if I am misreading.
I'm not correcting you. I'm interested in clarity.
Yeah, I would like more clarity, and that's kind of what we're doing here, right? We clarify all the little points that we're bringing out, but from my interpretation, there was no guideline of so much woodland and so much ag land. So if you're taking it all just to the numbers will give you an overall base of 10% of our total land is I have that figure somewhere, but like 170,000 acres. And are we going to do that in woodland? Are we going to do a portion of it in ag land? Are we going to start mandating any of that? And we've done pretty well in Vermont with a voluntary basis, and our forests are managed pretty well. And that's an industry that we don't want to be taking land away from. I was just at a meeting the other day with some folks, actually with Speaker of the House McCarthy and head of the Ag Committee, TJ Thompson from Pennsylvania. And they talked about how the land in California that is mismanaged by non-managing has actually led to and increased those chance of forest fires out there. So I don't want to see Vermont get into a point where we're in the same place, but I know that Speaker McCarthy was very adamant about, what do we need to do to fix these problems? So I just don't want to see us making a rule that makes us in a place where we're now we're now we're not managing. We have a problem now.
Representative Grant, did you have a question or comment? No, okay. Other questions?
Oh,
Anyone on Zoom? Oh, okay, Representative Grant.
so in page 6, this bill 2802, it states 30% of Vermont's total land acres. It doesn't specify just forests. So I assume it included by
Ag land,
as well.
any kind of land.
This is total land area.
My understanding is that the definition of conserved in this context, in this bill, would not include agriculturally conserved land. So and I'm not sure if that's what the distinction is here. The 30% and then the 50% can only be achieved by reaching one of the three categories that are defined earlier, and they're all essentially left to grow to some extent or another. So I don't think that,
forest land.
essentially, yeah, or possibly wetlands. And in any case, I don't think that anything that's conserved for agricultural purposes would count. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah. Again, so there are several of us, or Chairman Durfee and others on the boards. We need some clarification on that, on the impact of this proposed bill on ag land, apparently. We're not crystal clear on it. But Joe, I share your concern when California forest types or California agricultural practices are compared, or we're spoken of in the same sentence when we have one of the most complex forest types of all 47 that are in North America. And, our rainfall, our diversity, our contours, our soil depths, everything are completely uncomparable to California. So I can't believe this bill is based on a whole nationwide view. But maybe
I'm not accusing it of that. Sorry if I misrepresented myself. My point was just that we have national leaders that have been concerned about other places across the country, and I don't want us to get into any unforeseen instances because we just we stop managing land, and if in fact there is ag land coming up, say you want to save 10% of the ag land, 12,000 or so acres, right? I mean, if 12,000 acres just start to grow up and now you no longer have ag land there, it makes an effect on our countryside. And I think it has to be much clearer what this bill does. I think we need to have vibrant industry to go along with our conservation efforts and our greenhouse gas efforts. So I'm not accusing the bill of having it, but I do think it's unclear.
So we do have the Housing and Conservation Board coming in late this afternoon, which will give us an opportunity, I think, to clarify any definitional concerns. I do wonder, did you have an opportunity to present your concerns, either Amber or Joe, to the Committee of Jurisdiction and get questions clarified there?
We were invited in to House Environment and Energy very early on, but that was it.
On this bill?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And it's changed drastically since we were first in there.
Okay. Other questions? Representative O'Brien on Zoom.
I thought while we have Joe and Amber here, but it might be a more appropriate question for VHCB. I was wondering, are there limits on how much land you need in a parcel to be conserved? As we talk about forest fragmentation, I wonder, can you conserve 8 acres? Can you conserve, by current use rules, 27? There's sort of under 50 acres, which are going to see a lot of parcels of that size going forward. I just wondered, even whether it's ag land or forest land, whether there are problems or challenges with conserving relatively small parcels.
I don't have any recent rules to this. It used to be 10 years ago, it used to be you had to have 75 acres or more, I believe, in order to conserve land. I believe that was the number, and I could be totally wrong, but that number sticks. My farm is totally conserved. And we're actually adding a river corridor conservation to ours as a voluntary means of protecting the waterways near us. And we already have 50-foot buffers along our river. So what we're, we're not against it. We're not against conserving. We're just against taking it out of management.
Yeah,
Taking
no,
it-
that's right.
Go ahead, John.
Oh, I was just wondering, like, as far as the sponsors of the bill and those who might manage, that plan, whether, there are only so many acres, right, in Vermont, and if parcels start getting smaller, just what kind of challenges those present to us meeting those 30 by 30 and 50 by 50 goals.
Representative Templeman.
Hi. Of the existing 24% of Vermont lands that are conserved currently, how many or how much of that land is not managed at all? So what I'm wondering is perhaps more land may come into management if it's limited to 10%. That would be 3% of total lands would be unmanaged, but that might be less than what is currently under the 24% that is conserved at the moment.
That's probably a better question for folks this afternoon. I don't have I don't have any of those numbers.
Had you mentioned the 24%, Joe? I know we've heard a number like that. I'm not sure what the source is or whether that's a approximation.
That's the number we've been given through conservation.
Okay.
And
Representative Lipsky.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that includes all federal land and all state land, whether it's a park or a recreation. That's what it includes that plus private or other land. And as to Representative O'Brien's question, I think for both current use valuation for agriculture and forestry, the minimum area is 25 acres. So in theory, there could be tens of thousands of more 25-acre parcels or small. They are.
Yeah. Okay. And there's nothing in the bill that addresses current use other than there's nothing that directly or specifically calls out current use as it's currently drafted anyway. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any other questions, so thank you both for your testimony today.
Thank you for having us.
thank you for having us. Have a great day.